The air in the car was stale, but it was my air. After 12 hours of recycled cabin pressure and 2 airport transfers, all I could think about was my bed. Just the familiar weight of my own quilt and the quiet hum of the house at night. That was the only reward I needed after closing a major deal on a business trip I'd fought so hard for. I pulled into the driveway, seeing the familiar lights on, a warm beacon that promised rest after a long week away from home. But as the headlights swept across the lawn, they caught something wrong. There, piled by the front gate, were several large black trash bags. For a split second, I was just confused. Did I forget trash day? But a cold knot began to form in my stomach as my brain struggled to process the scene. The shapes were too personal, too familiar. Then I saw it, and the air left my lungs in a single, silent rush. Through a tear in one of the bags, the worn sleeve of my favorite jacket was sticking out, and in another, the glint of glass from a framed photo that sat on my nightstand. My books, my shoes, my entire world, all of it was packed into garbage bags and left on the curb like it meant absolutely nothing. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Just then, the front door opened. There stood my mother, Sharon, a woman whose face was set like cold, hard stone. She was flanked by my siblings, my brother Liam, the family's charming centerpiece, and my sister Chloe, his quiet shadow. Both of them stared intently at their feet, refusing to look at me, their silence a deafening testament to their complicity. My mother finally broke the silence, her voice devoid of any emotion, as if she were reading a notice. "You're 25 now, that's old enough. We need the space. Get out." I looked from her emotionless face to the bowed heads of my siblings, and then to the wreckage of my life by the gate. There was no argument to be made, no plea that would ever be heard. In that one brutal moment, years of quiet hurts and casual dismissals coalesced into a single sharp point of clarity. So, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. A small, strange smile touched my lips. I simply put the car in drive and pulled away without a single word. And the strangest part? As I drove away into the night, I didn't feel homeless. I felt free. Because they thought they were starting a war, but I was the one who had already finished it. That first night, sitting on the stiff, unfamiliar bed of a roadside hotel, the quiet was the loudest thing in the room. There was no shouting, no passive-aggressive sighs from the kitchen, no simmering drama waiting to boil over. It was just me and the low hum of the mini-fridge, and in that profound silence, the memories started to play back. They didn't come as a chaotic flood of anger, but rather as a calm, orderly presentation of evidence, exhibits in a case I had been unknowingly building against them my entire life. The trash bags on the curb weren't an isolated event. They were the closing argument to a trial I never realized had started. It always came back to my younger brother Liam, the family's charming but chronically irresponsible golden child. He possessed a unique talent for failing upwards, for turning his catastrophes into opportunities for sympathy. I'll never forget when he turned 19 and managed to wrap our family's only reliable car around a telephone pole. The police report clearly stated he was speeding, but back home, the story was spun into a tragedy where he was the sole victim. It was the road's fault. It was a patch of unseen gravel. It was just a moment of bad luck. Liam was swaddled in comfort and concern while I was asked to drive him to his friend's house the next day. The real kicker, the consequence for his recklessness, was a brand new sedan, co-signed by my parents, which plunged them deeper into a debt they always complained about. My mother's justification for it all was as swift as it was infuriating. "He was just so shaken up by the accident," she'd said, her voice filled with pity. "We had to show him our support." That single memory always stood in stark contrast to my own experience about a year earlier. I had just landed my first real career track job, the very one I was returning from when I found my life on the curb. The job required a commute, and I had been meticulously saving every spare dollar for a down payment on a simple, reliable used car. I had a whole binder with my budget, my savings plan, and the models I was looking at. I was just a few $100s short, and I swallowed my pride to ask them for a small loan, not a gift, a loan, with a full repayment plan drafted. My mother, Sharon, a woman who fundamentally confused her son's bottomless neediness with love, didn't even look up from her magazine. "Money is incredibly tight right now," she'd said, the words worn from overuse. Then came the line that always felt like a punishment disguised as praise. "Besides, you're so responsible. You'll figure it out." And I did. I figured it out by waking up at 5 in the morning to catch 2 separate buses, spending 4 hours a day in transit, and getting home long after dark, too exhausted to do anything but sleep and repeat. For 6 months, I figured it out because I had no other choice. My independence wasn't a source of pride for them, it was a convenience. It was an excuse to invest nothing in me because they knew I would find a way. Liam's constant crises gave my mother purpose, a stage for her maternal martyrdom. My stability, the quiet competence I worked so hard for, made me invisible to her. I didn't need saving, so I wasn't worth seeing. This entire dynamic was propped up by a false narrative, a family mantra they repeated so often it became their gospel. Liam is sensitive, my mom would sigh, as if describing a rare and delicate creature. He feels things so much more deeply than others, he just needs our help to find his footing in the world. The unspoken second half of that verse was always directed at me. But you've always been the strong one, the independent one. You don't need us. That narrative wasn't just an emotional tax. I eventually learned it was a literal one. It was the reason my rent was double the market rate for a room in that neighborhood, a price I paid without question because I believed I was contributing to the household. Liam, of course, lived for free. His sensitivity was far too precious to be burdened with something as crass as a bill. The entire illusion shattered about a year before they threw me out. It was such a stupid, careless mistake on their part. A single piece of mail left on the kitchen counter. It was a bank statement for the account my rent checks went into, and my eyes just happened to catch a line item as I walked by. It was a transfer for thousands of dollars. The memo line contained a single damning word, Liam. Suddenly, all the little inconsistencies, the constant state of being broke despite my significant contributions, started to make a terrifying kind of sense. I started paying closer attention. I saw overdue notices for credit cards in his name, angry letters from payday lenders. All of it. The picture that emerged was uglier than I could have imagined. My rent wasn't for the mortgage. It wasn't for the utilities or groceries. It was a secret, tax-free slush fund used to pay off my brother's gambling debts, his insurance, his endless stream of self-inflicted disasters. I wasn't their daughter. I was the silent, uncredited sponsor for the golden child. Lying in a hotel room that night, the one I paid for with the job they never supported, I realized they would never see me as a daughter. They only saw me as a resource. And a resource can be depleted. So I decided it was time to turn off the tap for good. Seeing that bank statement, seeing my hard-earned money being funneled directly to Liam's black hole of irresponsibility, it didn't break me. It forged me. The hurt was there, a deep, cold ache, but something else rose above it, a quiet, crystalline resolve. The years I'd spent trying to earn their love were officially over. That futile goal was replaced by a new one, a much more achievable one, securing my own future far away from them. This was no longer about revenge, it was about survival. My plan wasn't about screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. That was their language, the currency of chaos they thrived on. No, my rebellion would be silent, methodical, and invisible, just like they had always treated me. My receipts weren't going to be screenshots or angry emails presented in a family meeting. My proof of their betrayal would be my absence. My victory would be a series of quiet, deliberate actions designed to untangle myself from their web so completely that when the time came, I would simply vanish from their financial ecosystem. The very next day, on my lunch break, I walked into a bank my family had never used. I opened a new checking and savings account with only my name on it, a fortress of solitude for my finances. It felt like taking my first breath of clean air after a lifetime in a smoke-filled room. That afternoon, I logged into my company's payroll portal and rerouted my entire paycheck to this new account. With a few clicks, the secret pipeline that funded my brother's lifestyle was permanently severed. Next came the slow, careful process of untangling. I called the phone company, the internet provider, every utility that had my name attached to it. My excuse to my mother was simple and played right into the role she'd assigned me. I need to start building my own credit history, I told her, my voice even. She just nodded, uninterested, never questioning the logic. The responsible one was just being responsible. She had no idea I was quietly dismantling the scaffolding that held up her entire operation, one bill at a time. With my real income finally my own, my savings grew at a shocking rate. For the first time, I saw just how much they had been siphoning off. Each paycheck felt like another brick in the foundation of my new life. Weeks before that final business trip, I found it. A small, clean apartment in a part of the city they never visited. I signed the lease online and paid the deposit. The business trip was the perfect cover. allowing me to move boxes of essential documents and treasured sentimental items into my new empty home. The trash bags on the lawn, that was just the clutter I was happy to leave behind. They thought throwing my stuff on the lawn was their power move. They had no idea it was the final step of my plan. I had the keys. I had the funds. All they had was an eviction notice they wrote for themselves. The moment I was a few blocks away, safely out of sight, I pulled over to the side of a quiet, tree-lined street. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. My hands were perfectly steady as I took out my phone, its screen a small, bright rectangle in the darkness of the car. I navigated to my mother's contact, her picture smiling back at me from a birthday I'd paid for. Then Liam's, then Chloe's. I didn't pause to reflect or to reconsider. My actions were clinical, a necessary and overdue surgery. Block, block, block. There was no dramatic final text message, no furious, tear-choked voicemail. My confrontation wasn't going to be an explosion of words they could twist and use against me. It was going to be an absolute, deafening silence. In those 3 simple taps, I went completely dark, and in doing so, I switched off the life support system they never even knew they were on. I didn't need a spy to know what happened next. I had spent a lifetime studying their patterns. The first month, the consequences would have been minor, easily dismissed as everyday annoyances. The internet would have been shut off. I could practically hear my mother on the phone, berating some poor customer service agent, absolutely certain the fault lay with the provider's incompetence. Liam would have complained loudly about the lag in his video games, and they would have all agreed that service in this country was just getting worse. It would never have occurred to them that the bill simply hadn't been paid, because in their minds, I didn't pay the bill. The money just appeared. It was part of the household magic they took for granted. By the second month, the cracks would have started to show. Liam's car insurance payment would have bounced. A crisp, official-looking letter would have arrived, and the bubble of their denial would have been punctured by a tiny pinprick of anxiety. I can picture my mother's face, a mask of righteous fury, not at her son for being uninsurable, but at the faceless corporation for this outrageous error. "I will sort this out," she would have declared, a general rallying her troops, still utterly confident in her ability to fix any problem for her golden boy. She would have spent hours on the phone, only to be told in polite but firm terms that the payment was declined. The concept that there was no money to fix it would still be alien to her. The third month is when the real bomb would have detonated. It would have arrived in a brown envelope with a clear plastic window, containing words like pre-foreclosure and notice of delinquency. Those are words that cannot be ignored. That letter would have finally forced them to look at the numbers, to open the bank statements they'd let pile up. There, they would have seen it, the gaping month-after-month deficit, the clean, undeniable absence of the funds that had always magically been there. The slow, sickening realization would have washed over them. This wasn't a bank error. This wasn't a mistake. It was a person. It was my rent. It was me. From months 4 to 6, the controlled implosion I had initiated became a full-blown chaotic collapse. I knew this because the shockwaves finally reached the shores of the extended family. My cousin Sarah, the only one who ever treated me like a whole person, called me. Her voice was hesitant, laced with pity that I knew wasn't for me. She told me the frantic, desperate story my mother was weaving for anyone who would listen. It was a tale of a troubled, unstable daughter who had a sudden breakdown, stole money, and vanished in the night, leaving her loving family completely in the lurch. In their new narrative, they were the victims of a cruel and inexplicable betrayal. I just listened to Sarah, a strange and total sense of calm washing over me. They would rather burn their entire world to the ground than admit they were the ones holding the match. After 6 months of absolute silence, I decided I was ready. Sitting in the quiet comfort of my new apartment, with a cup of tea warming my hands, I felt a detached sense of curiosity. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was just an observer. I took a deep breath, went into my phone's settings, and unblocked my mother's number. The flood came instantly. A cascade of 60 messages, a digital record of a slow-motion car crash. The first ones were filled with entitled fury. "How dare you ignore your family? You owe us an explanation for this behavior." When that failed, they shifted to clumsy bargaining. "We can talk about this. Maybe you can move back in. We can lower the rent." The cluelessness of that offer was almost funny. Then, the tone curdled into pure panic. "Liam got into trouble again. We need your help." The bank is going to take the house. You have to do something. Finally, the pride shattered completely, leaving only raw, desperate pleading. Message after message, a torrent of need. Where are you? Please call me. I'm sorry. We need you. Over and over again. I read every single one. I saw the entire arc of their unraveling, the 5 stages of grief for a cash machine they had broken. And I felt nothing but the profound, quiet peace of a storm that has finally passed. And in the silence of my own living room, I hit block one last time. I didn't need to yell or show them spreadsheets. The truth wasn't in a folder of receipts. It was in the echoing silence of the bank account they had bled dry. After blocking them that final time, a silence fell over my life that was unlike any I had ever known before. It wasn't an empty silence, the kind that feels like a void. It was spacious. It was a blank canvas, and for the first time, I was the only one holding the brush. For those first few weeks, I moved through my new life with a quiet, almost sacred deliberation. I bought a real bed with a frame and a new mattress, not a hand-me-down that sagged with the weight of old memories. I bought plants, a fiddle leaf fig, a snake plant, a pothos, and I learned how to care for them, watching new leaves unfurl because of my attention, not in spite of my neglect. At work, I found a new level of focus, my mind no longer drained by the constant low-level hum of their impending crises. I started saying yes to things. I said yes to after-work drinks with colleagues, my laughter feeling strange and new in my own ears. I made new friends, people who knew nothing of the role I used to play. They didn't know me as the responsible one or the strong one. They just knew me. There was a lightness in being seen for who I was, not for what I could provide. Slowly, carefully, I began to furnish my life not just with things, but with peace, with boundaries, and with small, everyday joys that were entirely my own. The silence was no longer silent. It was filled with the gentle soundtrack of a life being built from the ground up. A year has passed since they put my life in trash bags by the gate. A full year since I smiled, put the car in drive, and chose myself. It's funny how a year can feel like both a lifetime and the blink of an eye. The person who drove away from that curb feels like a distant ancestor, someone whose story I know by heart, but whose skin I no longer inhabit. My life today is unrecognizable, not because it's grand or extravagant, but because it is so profoundly, peacefully, and completely mine. I was promoted at work a few months ago, a recognition of the energy and creativity I could now pour into my career. My boss had commended my focus, having no idea that my focus came from the simple absence of chaos. The biggest change, however, is currently asleep on my feet. His name is Gus, and he's a small rescue dog with one floppy ear and an endless supply of unconditional love. I found him at a local shelter, and I think in many ways we found each other. Caring for him is an exercise in healthy attachment. He needs me, and he gives back affection without calculation or agenda. He doesn't keep a tally of slights or favors. His love isn't a transaction. It's just a simple, warm, and constant presence. A reminder of what genuine connection feels like. Next month, Gus and I are going on vacation. A real one. I've booked a small cabin by a lake 3 states over, a place with hiking trails and no cell service. I spent a whole evening looking at maps and planning routes, the excitement pure and unadulterated. I thought back to the family vacations of my youth, which were always tense, miserable affairs orchestrated around Liam's whims and my mother's anxieties. This trip, this is for me. The money I'm spending on it is my money, not a fund to be secretly diverted to cover a debt or a disaster. It is an investment in my own happiness, and the return is already immeasurable. I still keep in touch with my cousin, Sarah. She's my only bridge to that old world, a bridge I cross very carefully. A few weeks ago, she called, her voice gentle, preparing me for news she thought would be upsetting. She told me what I suppose I already knew was the only possible outcome. The family home, the one filled with so much unspoken resentment, had been foreclosed on. The bank had taken it. My mother, Liam, and Chloe had been forced to move into a cramped, low-income apartment on the other side of town. The life they knew, the one I had unknowingly subsidized for so long, was gone. The most jarring update was about Liam. Without the bank of Mom, and by extension the bank of me, to constantly bail him out, he had been forced to get a second job. He now works evenings and weekends at a fast food restaurant. The golden child, the sensitive soul who was supposedly too delicate for the harsh realities of the world, was finally meeting those realities head-on. There were no more safety nets, no more enablers, no more invisible sister to absorb the cost of his choices. There were only consequences. Sarah mentioned they still tell people their version of the story, of course. They tell anyone who will listen that their cruel, selfish daughter abandoned them in their darkest hour. Sarah asked if that bothered me, the narrative they spin. I thought about it for a long moment, watching Gus twitch in his sleep, chasing dream rabbits. And I realized with a deep and settled calm that it didn't bother me at all. You can't abandon a post you were fired from, I told her, the words tasting like truth. My role in that family was a job, an unpaid, soul-crushing job with no benefits and mandatory endless overtime. I didn't quit. I was let go, and it was the greatest severance package I could have ever asked for. This morning, I'm sitting on my small balcony, a warm mug of coffee in my hands. The sun is just starting to spill over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Gus is curled up by my chair, and the city below is slowly starting to wake up. It's so quiet up here. It's so peaceful. And in this quiet, I finally understand the smile I wore as I drove away that night. It wasn't a smile of anger or defiance. It was the deep, bone-weary, exhilarating smile of a prisoner who has spent years meticulously digging a tunnel with a teaspoon, only to wake up one morning and find the guards have left the main gate wide open. It was the smile of victory. They didn't kick me out of their home, they kicked me into my own life. I learned that the strongest walls aren't built to keep others out, but to protect the peace you've built within. If you've ever had to become your own hero, leave a comment below. I see you.